Dobrodošli u Podcast Mrežnica. Naš današnji gost jedan je od najpoznatijih gostiju svjetskih podcasta na temu politike. On je bivši analitičar u američkoj obavještajnoj agenciji, odnosno CIA, ali i stručnjak za borbu protiv terorizma, Larry C. Johnson. S njime razgovaramo o budućnosti rata u Ukrajini, o budućnosti Europe, ali i svijeta i svemu onome što nas čeka u 2026. godini. Još jedanput dobrodošli u Podcast Mrežnica. Okay, dear Mr. Johnson, welcome back to our podcast. Good to see you again.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're welcome. Let's start things off with the war in Ukraine. The peace process has failed. Europe and Zelensky have rejected Trump's plan. As far as we can see, Ukraine won't give up land. What could happen? Trump is impatient.
Well, I think Donald Trump is now starting to wash his hands of the Ukrainian affair. Even though the U.S. Congress has just passed a bill authorizing another $800 million or something like that for Ukraine. The reality is, number one, Trump today called for elections in Ukraine. 2 days ago, his son, Don Jr., was excoriating Volodymyr Zelensky in the harshest terms possible. And I think the Trump administration is starting to distance itself from Ukraine. So, but none of this really changes what's taking place on the battlefield. On the battlefield, Russia has a decided advantage, one that cannot be surmounted either by Ukraine or Ukraine if every country in Europe said, oh, no, we're going to come fight on your side. The only thing it would change is the body count that would pile up in the West.
Can Europe save Ukraine?
No. Europe can't even save itself. They decided, oh, we're not going to ever buy any more Russian oil or gas. So therefore, they've condemned themselves to paying higher prices. And those higher prices are hitting economies that are already struggling. They are not growing. And in contrast to Russia, where, Russia's current growth rate is, about 1%, maybe a little less. That is a deliberate result of anti-inflationary policies put in place by the central banker, Nabulina, and with the full support of President Putin. That's not what's happening in Europe. In Europe, it's just that their economies are imploding. Germany itself was once the industrial giant within Europe, and it's shrinking with each passing day. A lot of its industries are moving to other countries, including to the United States, oddly enough. So Europe does not have the economic strength, the industrial capability to supply Ukraine and make Ukraine, even give Ukraine hope of surviving a military offensive by Russia.
Who can solve the problem? What can we expect? What will Trump do?
Trump holds no cards. That's he has no leverage. Zelensky has no leverage, and Europe has no leverage. The choice is simple. Accede to Russia's demands that Vladimir Putin outlined on June 14th, 2024, that international recognition that Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk are permanent parts of the Russian Federation, number one. Number two, that a concrete, backed-up, guaranteed pledge that can be verified that Ukraine will no longer join NATO and that NATO forces and advisors will be removed and leave Ukraine. That there is an election very soon to put in place a legitimate president of Ukraine, because Vladimir Zelensky is illegitimate, having stayed in office past his term by declaring martial law. Those are the main things that President Putin has laid out as the requirements for a peace agreement. But Ukraine is not willing to do that. So the only way it's going to happen is they're going to be defeated militarily. And Zelensky will either be killed or captured, or he'll flee in exile somewhere. The only three options for him. And generals like Sirski will either come to their senses and avoid being tried for war crimes, or they'll continue with their mindless war, and they'll end up being sentenced before a tribunal when the war ends. That's where I think it's headed. Personally, I think this will not stop until Kyiv and Odessa are back under the control of Russia.
So we can say, in a way, that this is the final countdown.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the beginning of the end. It's certainly not, but I would say it is the end of the beginning. So we're the process of militarily vanquishing Ukraine is well underway. The progress that the Russian army is making, in particular in Donetsk, is unbelievable now. It's moving with great speed forward, and Ukraine doesn't have an option and doesn't have an answer to stop it.
Well, the capitulation of Ukraine is being mentioned more and more often. Can we say Ukraine has lost this war definitely? And
no, they've lost the war. The only question is how much of Ukraine will remain before it's over. Mm-hmm. What I think will happen, because of their intransigence and insistence that they'll continue to fight on, I anticipate that Russia will not only finish taking the city of Zaporizhia, but will also take Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Poltava, and along with Odessa and Transnistria. So Ukraine will be blocked from any access to the Black Sea. And frankly, without access to the Black Sea, it cannot survive as a viable economy.
If you were to analyze and explain why Ukraine lost the war on the battlefield, what would you say? Where did they go wrong?
By trusting the West, trusting NATO. The fact of the matter is that since 1995, NATO has been using Ukraine as a proxy with the full intent to fight Russia, to destroy Russia. This is all about Russian resources. The West wants to control the oil, the gas, the gold, the uranium, the nitrogen, everything, the vast natural resources that Russia has. The West wants to control that. That's why there's such a hatred, visceral hatred of Vladimir Putin, because he put a stop to that back in, I believe, 2001. It was 2001, 2002, when he called in the oligarchs and said, basically, the rape of Russia is going to stop, and it's going to stop now. You're welcome to making and keeping your money, but you're not going to interfere in politics. You stay out of politics. You be businessmen, but you invest in Russia. None of the stealing money and sending it overseas. And only a very few opposed that. People like Khodorkovsky. But the rest, by and large, said okay. And look at the results that it's been for Russia. Russia is now the fourth largest economy in the world as measured by purchasing power parity. And Russia has modernized its economy in a way that is the Europeans can't. So its economy is actually bigger as measured by purchasing power parity than every country in Germany. And at the same time, Russia enjoys remarkable fiscal strength with the lowest debt to GDP ratio of all industrial countries in the world.
You mentioned Zelensky. Speaking of him and his future, who is his successor?
Don't know. There is some talk about bringing in Zelensky, General Zelensky, who's been serving as the ambassador to the UK. But I don't think Russia would accept him just being appointed as president without following the Ukrainian constitution. And I'm not up to speed right now on what the Ukrainian constitution says about replacing a president. Let's put it this way: Zelensky's removal will be the equivalent of someone dying in office. Whether he actually does die remains to be seen. But how the succession process goes, because normally I would think it would go to a vice president. I'm not sure there is a vice president. Who that vice president is. But Russia is going to insist on, following the law and following Ukrainian law, because they want to make sure that whatever agreement is entered into, it is at least enforceable within international courts, despite the constant yammering from the West that Russia is an abuser of law and a terroristic state. Fact of the matter is that Russia pays much more attention to details of international treaties and abiding by those than anybody in the West. And the West is the one who has abandoned, the nuclear arms agreements and anti-ballistic missile and INF agreements. So Russia is going to insist that things be done in an orderly, legal manner.
Let's talk about war between Europe and Russia. Is this war possible? I mean, in Europe, there is constant talk of war with Russia. At the same time, Putin has warned that Russia is ready for war if Europe attacks. Who might be the first to pull the trigger?
Well, let me put it this way. Are you familiar with, there was an actor, he was a wrestler, he was known as Andre the Giant. Did you ever hear of him? A big man, like almost more than 2 meters in height. And then there's an actor, Peter Dinklage. He was on Game of Thrones. He's about 3'4". So can Peter Dinklage fight Andre the Giant? Sure. He can throw some punches at him. He can try to kick him in the shins. He can try to bite him. But can Peter Dinklage beat Andre the Giant? No. So the question is, can Europe go to war with Russia? Sure. And Russia will get crushed. By comparison, even though on paper, Europe would have more troops than Russia, they are not competent. They are not properly trained. They're not properly equipped. And they don't have the logistics in store that would sustain them in combat beyond a week or two. So no, they talk about doing it, but when it comes to actually doing it, they're not competent and capable. And I believe that's one reason we've seen the general staff not use the Oreshnik missile of late, because they're saving it for that contingency. That's why they can carry out strikes that'll be as devastating as a nuclear strike, but without the radioactivity and without the massive collateral damage that a conventional nuclear weapon would cause.
Let's talk about the big document that everyone is talking about, the National Security Strategy of the USA. Your thoughts on this document?
They're words on paper that don't necessarily mean a lot. However, if we take it at face value, this is the equivalent of the United States telling Europe, basically, we're getting a divorce. I think it's time for us to start seeing other people. So that
open marriage. You mean open marriage?
No, not even open marriage. It's like, I don't even want to be around you anymore. Okay. So in Europe is like, oh, what? We've been in this 80-year relationship. You don't love me anymore. And basically us is saying, that's right. We don't love you anymore. So what's significant in that is Ukraine is hardly mentioned. Ukraine's mentioned only in the context of basically, if the war is going to continue, Europe's going to have to step up and keep Ukraine afloat, because the United States is not going to be there. And on paper, it downgrades the threat, how it presents Russia and China previous documents, both the one that Trump did in 2017 and that Joe Biden did in 22, 23, or the people in their administrations did, were much more antagonistic towards Russia, towards China. Now that's slipping away. Still recognizing both his adversaries, but let's call it the hostile rhetoric has died down. In a way, this document strikes me like an antique piece of furniture or an antique car. It serves it has a purpose, but it's no longer relevant to the modern world. Mm-hmm. And the world is changing. This document is based upon an assumption that the United States is a bona fide hegemon and will continue in that role, without recognizing or fully acknowledging the fact that the rise of BRICS is creating an alternative to the U.S.-dominated system, and that really there's nothing the United States can do to stop that. That it's coming, it's being born, it's coming to life, and the United States is not in a position to kill it. So, as BRICS becomes more influential, the United States will fade. Really what we're witnessing here is the end of the European empire. So from, even though you had the rise of the Ottoman Empire, in the 11th, 12th century, I may have my years wrong, it was Europe that, with the defeat of the Muslims in Spain, and then the rise of the kingdoms in France and old Prussia and what is now known as the United Kingdom, and the exploration that started of the world. Christopher Columbus in 1492, Vasco da Gama out of Portugal. And that really marked the start of a colonial empire building, where particularly the countries of Europe started claiming territory. Spain was claiming territory throughout Mexico, Central America, South America, Portugal to some extent as well. They were competing. So you had European powers competing over who got to control which part of Africa, who got to control which part of India, who got to control ultimately of China. And so starting in the 15th century, and we're talking 500 years, more than 500 years, Europe has dominated the world stage. And to that extent, Russia's always been sort of on the periphery, wanting to be part of Europe, but the Europeans are, no, those Slavs, we want no part of them. But we're now witnessing the end of that empire. The United States has been sort of the adopted heir, and it's played a role in that over the last 80 years. But even the United States can no longer sustain that role. Mm-hmm. And how do we know that? We saw in March of this year, when Donald Trump withdrew a U.S. carrier task force from the Red Sea because they couldn't stop the Houthis. Now remember, the initial purpose of that mission that was commissioned by Joe Biden back in, good Lord, was that December of 2023, I think? Yeah, Operation Prosperity Guardian, because the Houthis, in their attempt to support the Palestinians, vowed that they weren't going to allow any Israeli ships to get to Israel. And by God, they did that. They shut down the Red Sea to ships bound for Israel. And the United States, over, starting in, December of 2023, deployed an aircraft carrier task force, tried to stop it and couldn't. And so Trump escalated the conflict with the Houthis, and the Houthis ended up at least leading to the destruction of 3 major aircraft. They were shooting down $30 million drones, Predator drones, one per week. So the cost of the United States suddenly soared to over $1 billion. And the United States had to withdraw. Mm-hmm. That is, that's akin to what happened when the Roman Empire started to collapse, when they were losing battles to the the folks in the north. So this marks, this is we're in a transition period. And I think Russia recognizes that its future now lies in the East. I know I've had the pleasure of meeting with and talking to Sergei Karaganov. And Mr. Karaganov has been a visionary in that regard, recognizing, hey, the future of Russia's in the East. Glenn Deason, a professor from Norway, has also written an important book on that. So, we're witnessing this transition in the world, and the United States has yet to come to grips with the fact that it's losing, it's lost, and there's no coming back from this now. All it could do is try to integrate itself as an equal in the new world order. But that's not how the United States perceives itself. It perceives itself as the boss. You're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. And that's quite a contrast with the Russian mentality and the Chinese mentality. Both are grounded in, we need to cooperate and work together without having to say, you're the big boss and I'm just the number two. There's none of that. So.
And what is the future of Europe? Will migration destroy Europe? Yeah.
No, Europe has no future.
Really?
Yeah, Europe has no. What do they have? They have no natural resources. They're dependent entirely on imports of fuel for their economies. They don't have any centers of excellence for innovation and technology. They're not on the cutting edge of either artificial intelligence or computer chips. So again, they created, the Industrial Revolution started there.
Yeah.
They made some of the most dramatic innovations, the science of people like Isaac Newton and then Galileo down in Italy. The giants that we go back and look at in science, Einstein, Niels Bohr on the physics side. But that was then. That has gone away now. The leaders, particularly in the areas of science, engineering, mathematics, are increasingly coming out of China and India, and Russia also plays an important role in that. Not as large as China and India. Europe doesn't. So, Europe doesn't have massive armies. Their economies are shrinking, not expanding, and they don't have any essential natural resources that anybody needs. They need trade with other countries more than other countries need trade with Europe.
What is the main problem of Europe today? From your point of view, politicians, demographic, mindset, lack of leaders, or weak leaders, as Trump said?
Their abandonment of Christianity. They have essentially abandoned. All of these countries come out of a Christian tradition, and unfortunately, over the years, they didn't live up to their Christian values. So you'd have German Catholics fighting, the Church of England on the battlefields in World War I, World War II. So, the Christians created a bloody mess amongst themselves. However, the importance of Christianity in Europe was, you could see it. All the major cathedrals that dominate the landscape in London, in Paris, in Madrid, in Rome, especially in Rome, in Germany. Now with the mass flow of migrants into the European community, that Christian heritage is being diluted and in many cases eliminated. I think there was, and it's unfortunate. I'm not trying to suggest that Islam is not a legitimate religion, but it's just the cultural imprint that was put on, that made Europe was based in a Christian heritage, not an Islamic heritage. In fact, it was the fight against Islam that gave birth and rise to Europe. This really sort of lit the fuse that made the European empire come to the fore and dominate over really the last 5 centuries. So that's the main thing. And is that reversible now? Unlikely. It's possible, but accompanying this this abandonment of Christianity, there's been a rise in occult activities, and this is where Islam actually comes into conflict with the West, because the Muslims, whether we're talking Sunni or Shia, uphold very conservative values, and tend to be more pro-family, and are not out encouraging abortions. They discourage abortions, and whereas within the Caucasian populations of Europe, the abortion has become a fairly common thing in many countries, and that's where you kill off your future generations. So it is, and I think actually that's at one of the other explanations for the European hatred of Russia. Russia's return to its traditional Christian values as embodied in the Russian Orthodox Church, and celebration, particularly of family, are seen as a threat to Europe, who is much more disinclined to pursue that kind of belief.
You were a CIA analyst. If you were working today, how would you interpret all these events? What is happening to the world?
Yeah, the world's changing. We are
Absolutely.
we're in the midst of a fundamental change. The last time we saw this was from April 1945 through let's say the end of December of 1948. So that 3-year period saw the end of Hitler's attempt to build a 1,000-year Reich, the creation of a new international political and economic order. You had the United Nations, the World Court, and the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, and all of this was under the Bretton Woods system. It took 2 or 3 years to get it in place, but it put in place a system that then basically financed global growth for the next 40, 50 years. So that's coming to an end. The old system is breaking down. It's symbolized by SWIFT. If ever there was an ironic name, it is SWIFT, because SWIFT implies fast moving, quick, but it's anything but. SWIFT is a system for transferring funds between banks, between countries. But now it's being done not digitally, but conventionally over, like I send you an email and it gets lost in spam and you don't see it for a day or two. And then, oh my God, Larry sent me an email. I need to get,
Oh my God.
So 24, 36 hours pass. Well, that's SWIFT. Whereas China has introduced a system called SIPS, and it's digital. It takes place within seconds. So you've got the BRICS countries, Russia, China, India, moving increasingly towards this digital era. And here's Europe and the United States still based on a system that's like, instead of saying, hey, we got brand new electric cars, we can drive a Bugatti, really expensive car, or we can ride a horse. Well, the West, frankly, is still riding horses when we've got Bugattis running around on the streets.
So who will survive?
Russia, China, and India for sure. Europe, I think Europe is going to. They're not going to disappear.
Of course, I hope so.
Yeah, well, but the future is not bright for Europe. It is an anachronism. It is it's going to sort of fade in importance, because there's no way that France and the United Kingdom should anymore have veto power on the United Nations Security Council. And they're going to fight as hard as possible to retain that control, that power. But the fact of the matter is, they're no longer relevant in this way.
Speaking about future, what kind of year awaits us in 2026?
Tremendous upheaval. I think the potential for a global economic crisis is high. The political crisis that will come as a result of the defeat of Ukraine, and as that, because there are a lot of European countries that have lent a lot of money to Ukraine, and that payment's they're not going to get paid. That they're going to default. They're going to lose that money, and we're talking billions, hundreds of billions potentially. So you get the military defeat of Ukraine, and by extension NATO, and so NATO will be in crisis, trying to figure out, are they, they're no longer relevant, but they still think they are. So as long as they think they're relevant, they're going to continue to play role play. They're now like children that dress up like doctors and nurses and say, "Oh yeah, we're a doctor and a nurse," but they actually have no qualifications to treat anybody medically. So they're good at dressing up and pretending, but they don't have actual power behind that.
I forgot to ask you, but did corruption kill Ukraine?
Oh yes,
in a way.
It's been a contributing factor. Mm-hmm. The current focus has been on this $100 million that Umarov, I guess it's reportedly, or Timur Mindich reportedly took. That is just the very tip of what is an enormous amount of corruption. A former business partner and good friend of mine is directly involved in the investigation of $48 billion that Ukraine has taken out of $360 billion received over the last 3.5 years. That money has been paid out to politicians, both Republicans and Democrats. I know the names of specific Republicans and Democrats that have a Democrat senator from the East reportedly received $29 million. A Republican senator from the South received $23 million, $19 million. So you just wonder, when you look at people like Kaya Kallas talking about the need to continue the war. I guarantee you, Kaya Kallas has made money. I think she's gotten paid. I think Ursula von der Leyen, she's gotten paid. So we know that Boris Johnson, as an example, he was having money funneled to him through a fellow who had contracts in Ukraine. And, guarantee you those contracts were likely obtained, secured with the assistance of Boris Johnson. So the corruption is on. It's not confined to Ukraine and Ukrainian officials. The real dirty secret is that the Western officials have been profiting from this. Mm-hmm. And the effort to bring it under control is what's eliciting a pushback. But, Ukraine, I think Ukraine has been unfairly vilified as the most corrupt country in Europe. It's just the other European countries are better at hiding their corruption.
I agree with you. Do you have some final thoughts before we wrap this video up?
Just that people now are living through a historic moment. Mm-hmm. This is as consequential for the future of the world as what happened back in 1946, 47, 48. And now as we look back, we realize that this entire structure that led to what was known as the Cold War was provoked primarily by the West, because the West was unwilling to sit down and let Russia be Russia, and instead bought into this notion that Russia was pushing an international communist conspiracy, and therefore the world became a battleground pitching against the capitalist West and the communist East. And it was all, keep the conflict going because it kept military industrial complex alive. And as long as we had an enemy, we could justify spending billions of dollars, now trillions of dollars. So that's why, we've seen over the last 35 years, go back to 1998, 99, when President Putin asked Bill Clinton, may we, Russia, join NATO? And the answer came back, no, niet. Why? Well, if Russia joined NATO, NATO would have no reason to exist anymore. And there would be no justification for keeping massive armies built up. You might actually have to get along and like one another.
Yeah. Mr. Johnson, thank you very much for your time and for this interview.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Wish you all the best.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See you. Hope. Bye-bye.